So you think you could see a whole world of relatively small businesses that just sort of struggle along?
Yeah, so that's, I think, another really interesting question that, and they might not struggle. They might be challenged by their capital structure. So if they had a bunch of venture capital put in them, now you've got a bunch of people around the table who are looking for an exit. It's not as obvious where that exit is going to come from. And that's going to be, they're going to have to work through that. But you could end up with a whole series of really neat small businesses that generate great cash flow and would be, had they been bootstrapped, a wonderful lifestyle business for the entrepreneur that they're going to have a challenge to work out. One of the things we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs talking about is, should you really be taking venture capital? And we spend more time talking people out of it than we do talking them into it.
We're going to go to questions in a moment, but you mentioned Foursquare, in which you're an investor. I guess I still haven't got a sense of how geolocational products are actually going to be useful for me. I'm sure they will be, but I don't want to be the mayor of The Economist or anything like that. And I haven't found myself using it. I worry about the privacy elements of it. Where do you see the greatest potential over the next year or two for this to really develop a really viable business model that catches on with people like me?
So I'm a pilot, and in an airplane they have GPS, and on that GPS there's a button that says nearest. Obviously the reason for that button is if your engine quits, you push it and it tells you where the nearest airport is. And they don't want to make that complicated. If you have to go through 3 menus to get to that, you probably have already hit the ground. And so nobody's really completely nailed that experience online. And the key is it should be 2 to 3 touches at most. You should be able to hit nearest, and then it should be a highly personalized, relevancy-ranked list of things that you might be looking for, coffee, gas, whatever. And you should be able to get to where you want to go, and it should pop up a map and directions instantly. Nobody's really nailed that. The problem with creating that fabulous user experience is that it's got to be personalized to you, and it can't be personalized to you unless you're sharing data with the service provider. Because if I have to go through and actually, a standard menu that's, somehow based on aggregate data of what I might be interested in, it's going to take too long. It's not going to be a great experience. So the really interesting problem around geo is that there is a kind of primal fear of people knowing where I am, and yet the really compelling services are going to depend on that. And they're also going to depend on knowing what it is that you're likely to be interested in. And so, one of the things I spend a lot of time worrying about is that the government in the US and the FTC is particularly concerned about geodata and the privacy of geodata. And I can understand all of the scenarios in which they would be concerned about that. But I worry that they might be precluding the possibility of some really fabulous services that once we saw them, we would go, wow, I can't believe that's possible, and it's really useful to me. And I don't know what advice to give them or how to play it, because I think there are legitimate concerns on the other side.
Great. Well, let's go to questions from the audience. We've got microphones that are going to come around. Who'd like to kick us off? Is there someone somewhere at the front here? There's a lady at the front.
Hi, Dawn.
So the mic's just coming.
This is
now.
Dawn is a plant.
Just say who you are.
Hi, I'm Dawn Barber. And Brad, I know you talk about net neutrality a lot. And in terms of how do you think that the bubble's going to play out in terms of the aftermath or not in that context?
Well, I'm a huge believer in decentralized, organic, bottoms-up, often venture-backed innovation. I started my career at AT&T, as Dawn knows, and I watched AT&T through the 90s attempt to get into the portal business, create consumer-facing services, and they struggled. And none of those services are around today. None of them have any users. And the culture of that company is a service-driven culture, but it's essentially around providing connectivity, not about providing subtly differentiated consumer services. And so I think that society would be better served with a relatively clean distinction between the infrastructure layer and the applications layer. And I think that in a perfect world, we would see aggressive competition at the infrastructure layer for providing higher bandwidth at lower prices. And we'd see aggressive competition above that between service providers to create everything from SLAs, service level agreements, to guarantee a certain amount of connectivity, cryptographic capabilities so that I could be comfortable that my data is secure, storage and hosting, all sorts of things that if it were possible, I think, as policymakers to encourage innovation on top of that core network, I think we'd end up with a richer set of services, more competition, better global competitiveness, and a bunch of other good things.
Okay, do we have another question? Okay, I mean, while we have over there, great.
Just to tie into that a little bit, over here.
Can you say who you are?
Kurt Steege. Just to tie into that a little bit, you talk about this core services, and you talk about this application layer. At its core, we still have to deal with a little bit around identity and how that identity gets managed. And we talk about the vulnerabilities. How do we get to that area where we have ubiquitous identity, non-repudiated identity, so that how does that get served? I mean, I know it's a huge problem and it's not a simple answer, but that's something that's really at its core around where we have to be.
I know that Venturesome was on the dais earlier today. I wasn't here, so I don't know exactly what he said. I saw him speak last week, and he made a very compelling argument for the ability to remain anonymous and the ability to prove who you are, which seem contradictory, but I think that makes perfect sense. One of the thought exercises I've gone through recently is thinking about, many of you probably know about this group that calls themselves Anonymous. So this is a group of hackers who basically were nurtured and spawned out of 4chan, who have taken down a number of sites that they disagree with. And I'm sitting here, okay, so these are the people who want desperately to be anonymous and maybe need to be anonymous to remain out of jail. And yet, if I were interested in taking them down, I would probably launch attacks that use their MO against services that hackers and geeks cherished, like 4chan. And I would claim those attacks on behalf of Anonymous. And all of a sudden, it would erode the support in the tech community for what they were doing. So they actually have an interest in being able to prove who they are, even though they also have a very vital interest.
This sounds like you're advocating the networks use CIA tactics from the 1960s to counterinsurgency and so forth. I mean, you're taking your foreign policy arguments very far.
Did I say that? Did I say that? Did you guys hear that? I don't think I said that. I think, I agree with Venturesome. I think you should be able to exchange a cryptographic key with someone who, in the process of doing that, you can prove that you are who you say you are, right? But you can also remain anonymous. That's not suggesting that the CIA actually figure out who everybody is, because you're no longer anonymous in that case. But it's a really hard problem. That is a really hard problem.
Is badly designed privacy policy your biggest worry about how this whole phenomenon might go off the rails, or is there something worse?
Okay, so no. I mean, I think I believe that we should, as a government and as a society, be enthusiastically supporting decentralized, organic, bottoms-up innovation. I think the way to do that, there's a number of policy things that you have to pay attention to. I think there are copyright issues, and I'm concerned that the current legislation in Congress called PIPA is going to, could have, if it were implemented in '97, prevented the emergence of Google, which I think we'd all agree is a fabulous service. And we have to be careful about overreaching with copyright protection. I worry, as Don points out, about net neutrality, because I think it is possible to use the leverage of the duopoly in the last mile to vertically integrate into the services layer, and that doesn't help us. I worry about patents, because right now business method patents and software patents have become just a ticking time bomb that are, we have 38 portfolio companies. Over a third of them have been sued, and the only difference between the ones that have and the ones that haven't is the visibility and success of the ones that have. Every one of them will be sued by somebody looking for a payoff for a patent. There are some other things that I think would be, sort of innovation friendly from a government perspective in terms of creating a market that regulates itself, that provides for competition. I think this question of portable identity is a really interesting question in the world of, big network effects and big networks. There's a bunch of things that all I tie together that I think would help innovation.
Well, talking of ticking time bombs, unfortunately, our time is up. We've touched on a lot of big thoughts, and I mean, do you tweet and things? Can we follow you there, or?
You can, yeah. Brad at USV, or not Brad at USV. Brad USV is Brad USV is my Twitter handle. But I don't tweet very often. It's much more fun to follow my partner Fred Wilson. He and I talk a lot, so you get a lot of my thoughts that way. But
great, and I'm at The Economist. Twitter at Matt Bish, M-A-T-T-B-I-S-H. Thank you very much, Brad.